Welcome to today's episode of Human Origins, the greatest journey ever told. Picture this. You're standing at the edge of what seems like an endless sea of sand, stretching beyond the horizon until it meets the shimmering sky. The sun beats down mercilessly, promising death to anyone foolish enough to venture into this wasteland without preparation. This is the Sahara Desert as we know it today, the largest hot desert on Earth, covering an area larger than the entire United States. But imagine, if you will, that you're not alone. Around you stand your family, your tribe, carrying nothing but primitive stone tools and the clothes on their backs. You have no maps, no compass, no GPS. Yet somehow, you know you must cross this vast emptiness. Your survival depends on it. Your species' future depends on it. This impossible scenario actually happened, not once, but multiple times throughout human history. Between 2 million and 50,000 years ago, our ancestors achieved what seems unthinkable. They crossed some of the world's most forbidding deserts, journeying thousands of miles through landscapes that would challenge even modern explorers with all their technology. How did they do it? How did early humans with brains 1/3 the size of ours navigate endless dunes, find water in the driest places on Earth, and not only survive, but thrive in environments so hostile that they've claimed countless lives throughout recorded history? Today, we're going to uncover one of the most remarkable survival stories in human evolution, the story of how our ancestors conquered the desert and, in doing so, conquered the world. Chapter 1. The Impossible Desert. The year is 1.8 million BCE. In what is now the Sahara Desert, a small group of early humans stands at the edge of their known world. These aren't modern humans. They're Homo erectus, our distant ancestors with thick brow ridges, powerful jaws, and brains roughly half the size of ours. Yet they're about to attempt something that seems impossible, crossing thousands of miles of desert to reach lands beyond the horizon. Imagine yourself standing among them for a moment. You're perhaps 5 feet tall, built like a distance runner with long, powerful legs adapted for covering ground efficiently. Your brain, while smaller than a modern human's, is already 3 times larger than our earliest ancestors. Your hands, though strong and capable, have never held anything more sophisticated than carefully crafted stone tools. You carry no map, no compass, no GPS device. The concept of written language won't exist for another 1.5 million years. Yet you're about to embark on a journey that will take you across an entire continent. But here is the thing that would completely transform your understanding of this story: the landscape. They looking at bears no resemblance to the Sahara we know today. Instead of endless dunes and scorching sand, they see grasslands stretching to the horizon, dotted with acacia trees and crossed by rivers that sparkle in the sunlight. Hippos wallow in shallow lakes, elephants trumpet in the distance, and antelope graze peacefully on the savanna. The air carries the sound of flowing water and the calls of countless birds. This isn't a desert at all. It's a paradise. This was the Green Sahara, one of the most dramatic climate transformations our planet has ever witnessed. Scientists have discovered that over the past 8 million years, the Sahara has repeatedly transformed from a lush, well-watered landscape to the harsh desert we know today. These cycles, driven by slight wobbles in Earth's orbit that change how much solar radiation reaches different parts of our planet, created windows of opportunity that early humans exploited with remarkable skill. The orbital mechanics behind these transformations are fascinating in their precision. Every 23,000 years, Earth's axis wobbles slightly, changing the angle at which summer sunlight hits North Africa. When that angle is just right, the West African monsoon strengthens dramatically, carrying moisture hundreds of miles further inland than it does today. The result is a complete ecosystem transformation that can happen in as little as a few centuries, lightning fast in geological terms, but slow enough for plant and animal communities to adapt and migrate. The evidence for these ancient green periods is written in the rocks themselves. In caves beneath the Arabian Peninsula, researchers have found stalagmites that reveal at least 8 humid periods over the past 8 million years. These natural climate archives, formed drop by drop over millennia, contain chemical signatures that tell us not just when it rained, but how much it rained, what the temperature was like, and even what kinds of plants were growing at the surface. During these times, what are now some of the world's driest deserts supported vast networks of rivers, lakes, and forests. Fossil pollen shows that areas now covered by sand dunes once hosted forests of cedar and oak trees, grasslands that supported massive herds of grazing animals, and wetlands teeming with fish and waterfowl. The scale of these ancient ecosystems is almost incomprehensible. During peak green periods, Lake Chad expanded to cover an area larger than the Caspian Sea. Rivers flowed year-round across what is now hyper-arid desert, creating corridors of lush vegetation that stretch from the Atlantic Ocean to the Red Sea. Fossil evidence shows that crocodiles, hippos, and even elephants lived in areas that now receive less than an inch of rain per year. Archaeological sites across the Sahara tell the same story. At Gabbero in Niger, archaeologists have uncovered an ancient cemetery where people buried their dead beside a lake that no longer exists. The graves contain fishing hooks, harpoons, and pottery decorated with wavy lines, evidence of a sophisticated fishing culture that thrived in what is now one of the most water-scarce regions on Earth. The pottery itself tells a remarkable story. Some of the earliest ceramic technology in the world developed in the Sahara, where seasonal abundance allowed for the sedentary lifestyle necessary for developing complex crafts. The burials at Gabbero reveal something else extraordinary. These ancient people were tall, well-nourished, and lived remarkably long lives for prehistoric humans. Skeletal analysis shows that they had access to abundant fish protein, which supported healthy development and longevity. Some individuals lived into their 60s, an exceptional age for people living 8,000 years ago. The preservation of the bones themselves in the dry desert climate has allowed researchers to reconstruct these ancient lives with extraordinary detail, down to evidence of healed injuries and signs of deliberate dental modification for cultural or aesthetic purposes. Rock art scattered across the Sahara provides perhaps the most compelling evidence of these ancient green worlds. In the Cave of Swimmers in Egypt's Gilf Kebir Plateau, prehistoric artists painted scenes of people diving and swimming in waters that dried up thousands of years ago. The paintings are so detailed that researchers can identify specific swimming strokes and diving techniques, suggesting that these weren't occasional activities, but regular parts of daily life. In Algeria's Tassili Niger Mountains, ancient rock paintings show cattle herds, crocodiles, and hippos in landscapes that today receive less rainfall than the Sahara. But our Homo erectus ancestors were unpassive observers of these environmental changes. They were active participants in one of the greatest migration stories in human history. As the climate fluctuated between wet and dry periods, early humans developed strategies that allowed them to not just survive, but to exploit these changing conditions to spread across the continent and beyond. Recent discoveries at a site called Engezi Nanyori in Tanzania have revealed how adaptable these early humans really were. When their lush woodland home began transforming into a semi-desert environment around 1 million years ago, they didn't abandon the area. Instead, they developed new survival strategies that demonstrate remarkable behavioral flexibility. They began making sharper stone tools, presumably for more efficient hunting and butchering of the increasingly scarce game animals. They started carrying tools with them when they moved to new locations, showing a level of planning and foresight that we once thought was unique to modern humans. The tool technology itself reveals the sophistication of their adaptation. Analysis of the stone implements shows that they had developed specialized tools for different aspects of desert survival. Pointed instruments for digging up roots and tubers, sharp-edged scrapers for processing plant fibers that could be woven into water containers, and carefully shaped cutting tools that could efficiently butcher animals to extract every scrap of nutrition and useful material. Most importantly, they learned to read the landscape with extraordinary skill. They identified ephemeral waterholes that appeared after rare rainstorms and followed animal migration routes to reliable water sources. They discovered that certain plants could provide water during the driest periods and learned to cache supplies for lean times. Evidence from multiple archaeological sites shows that they developed mental maps of remarkable complexity, tracking seasonal changes in water and food availability across territories spanning hundreds of square miles. The fossil evidence shows that these early desert crossings weren't desperate flights by starving refugees. Instead, they were strategic movements by people who had developed sophisticated survival skills. Stone tools found across North Africa show remarkable consistency in design, suggesting that knowledge and techniques were being shared across vast distances. This wasn't random wandering. It was purposeful exploration by people who understood their environment intimately and had developed cultural mechanisms for preserving and transmitting crucial survival knowledge. These ancient desert crossers also left behind evidence of complex social cooperation that goes far beyond anything we see in other early human sites. Footprints discovered in Saudi Arabia show groups of early humans traveling together in coordinated formations, possibly hunting cooperatively near ancient lakes. The preservation of elderly and disabled individuals in the archaeological record suggests that these societies took care of their vulnerable members, even during difficult migrations, a level of social support that requires considerable group organization and forward planning. The evidence for long-distance communication and coordination is equally impressive. Identical tool-making techniques, artistic motifs, and even specific types of raw materials appear at sites separated by thousands of miles and spanning centuries of occupation. This suggests that early desert peoples maintained extensive social networks that could preserve and transmit technical knowledge across vast distances and long periods of time. Chapter 2. Green Corridors Through Time. Understanding how early humans crossed the desert requires us to completely reimagine what these landscapes looked like in the distant past. The key to unlocking this mystery lies in understanding the Sahara pump, a climate mechanism that has been transforming the face of Africa for millions of years, creating and destroying vast ecosystems with a regularity that has shaped the entire course of human evolution. Every 23,000 years, Earth's orbit around the Sun changes in a subtle but crucial way. The planet's axis wobbles slightly, changing the angle at which solar radiation hits different parts of the globe. This phenomenon, called axial precession, is like a cosmic metronome that has been beating out the rhythm of climate change for millions of years. When this orbital precession brings more summer sunlight to North Africa, something remarkable happens. The West African monsoon strengthens dramatically, carrying moisture far inland from the Atlantic Ocean. The physics of this transformation are elegant in their simplicity, but staggering in their consequences. As the northern hemisphere tilts toward the sun during summer, the increased solar radiation creates intense heating over the Sahara. This heating creates a massive low-pressure system that draws moisture-laden air far inland from the Atlantic Ocean. The moisture-carrying winds, strengthened by temperature differences between land and sea, penetrate hundreds of miles further into the continent than they do during normal periods. When these moisture-rich air masses encounter the highland regions of Central Africa, they dump their water in torrential seasonal rains that transform the landscape almost overnight. The results are nothing short of spectacular. Rivers that hadn't flowed for millennia suddenly spring to life, cutting new channels through ancient sediments and carrying vast quantities of fresh water toward the sea. Lakes form in depressions that have been dry for thousands of years, some growing to sizes that dwarf the largest lakes on Earth today. Rainfall increases by a factor of 10 or more, transforming barren landscapes into lush savannas virtually overnight in geological terms. The speed of this transformation is almost incomprehensible. Within just a few centuries, areas receiving less than an inch of rain per year can become grasslands receiving 40 inches or more annually. Scientists studying sediment cores from the Mediterranean Sea have found evidence of these dramatic transformations, written in layers of mud and pollen that have accumulated on the seafloor over millions of years. During green periods, rivers carried vast quantities of sediment northward from the Sahara, creating distinct layers that can be dated with remarkable precision, using radiometric techniques and magnetic field reversals preserved in the sediments. The pollen in these layers tells an extraordinary story. During wet periods, the Sahara supported not just grasslands but actual forests, with cedar, pine, and oak trees, growing where today only the hardiest desert plants can survive. The isotopic chemistry of these ancient sediments reveals even more detailed information about past climates. Oxygen isotope ratios in fossilized shells and plant material show not just that it was wetter, but provide precise measurements of temperature, humidity, and seasonal rainfall patterns. Carbon isotope ratios reveal what types of plants dominated ancient ecosystems, whether they were tropical forests, temperate woodlands, or grassland savannas. These chemical signatures paint a picture of environmental conditions so different from the modern Sahara that they seem almost fantastical. Spaceborne radar has revealed another crucial piece of this puzzle. Beneath the sand dunes of the modern Sahara lie the buried channels of ancient river systems invisible to the naked eye but clear in satellite images that can penetrate several feet below the surface. These fossil rivers show vast networks of waterways that once connected the heart of Africa to the Mediterranean Sea. During the most recent green period, which lasted from about 15,000 to 5,000 years ago, these rivers carried fresh water across what is now hyper-arid desert, creating ribbons of lush vegetation that served as highways for human and animal migration. The most remarkable of these buried river systems is the ancient Sahabi River, which once flowed for over 1,000 miles from the central Sahara to the Mediterranean coast. Radar imaging shows that this river had a drainage basin larger than the modern Colorado River, with numerous tributaries that collected water from across a region the size of Texas. During green periods, this river system would have supported gallery forests along its banks and vast wetlands at its mouth, environments that could have supported large human populations and served as stepping stones for migration out of Africa. The most recent Green Sahara period provides the clearest picture of what these ancient landscapes looked like. Archaeological evidence from sites like the Dakhla Oasis in Egypt shows that during this time, the Sahara supported not just wildlife but complex human societies that developed sophisticated technologies and cultural traditions. People lived in permanent settlements beside large lakes, engaged in fishing, hunting, and later, cattle herding. They developed sophisticated pottery traditions, creating vessels decorated with intricate geometric patterns that show clear artistic development over thousands of years. The animal life supported by these Green Sahara ecosystems was spectacular in its diversity and abundance. Fossil evidence shows that during wet periods, the Sahara was home to elephants, giraffes, rhinoceros, buffalo, lions, and countless species of antelope. Crocodiles reached lengths of over 30 feet, and hippos wallowed in lakes that stretched to the horizon. The fish populations were so abundant that they supported permanent fishing settlements with sophisticated boat-building traditions and complex processing and preservation technologies. But the Green Sahara wasn't just about the Sahara itself. Climate data shows that when the Sahara was green, the entire desert belt that stretches from West Africa across Arabia to the Thar Desert of India experienced similar wet conditions. This created what scientists call green corridors, pathways of habitable landscape that connected Africa to Asia and beyond. The timing of these humid phases across this vast region was remarkably synchronized, suggesting that they were driven by the same large-scale climate mechanisms. The Arabian Peninsula during green periods was particularly important for human migration. Paleoclimate data from cave deposits, lake sediments, and groundwater aquifers shows that during wet phases, Arabia supported extensive river systems, large lakes, and grassland ecosystems similar to modern East African savannas. These conditions created ideal migration routes from Africa into Asia, with reliable water sources, abundant game animals, and familiar vegetation types that would have supported the survival strategies that early humans had already developed in Africa. The timing of these green periods coincides remarkably with major phases of human migration. The earliest evidence of humans outside Africa, at sites like Manisi in Georgia, dated to 1.8 million years ago, corresponds with one of these humid phases when migration routes across the Middle East would have been well-watered and hospitable. Recent discoveries have revealed that these green corridors weren't just convenient pathways, they were crucibles of human innovation. At sites in Jordan and Saudi Arabia dating to green periods, archaeologists have found some of the earliest evidence of advanced tool-making techniques, artistic expression, and symbolic behavior. The challenges of living in these transitional environments, where conditions could change rapidly from wet to dry, seem to have spurred technological and cultural innovations that would prove crucial for human success in diverse environments. The discovery of Nubian-style stone tools in Oman provides compelling evidence for how these corridors worked in practice. These distinctive tools, first identified in the Nile Valley, have been found across Arabia, suggesting that people and ideas move freely across what we now think of as impossible barriers. The tools show clear African characteristics but also local innovations, indicating that these weren't just one-way migrations, but complex networks of cultural exchange that enriched both the migrating populations and the communities they encountered. Marine isotope data from the Red Sea and Persian Gulf reveals that sea levels were often lower during these green periods, creating land bridges and narrower water crossings that would have facilitated human movement. Combined with increased rainfall and vegetation, these conditions created multiple opportunities for human dispersal. People could follow river valleys across the Sahara, island hop across the Red Sea during low water periods, or take coastal routes when sea levels were higher and inland routes were blocked. The archaeological record shows that early humans were remarkably good at recognizing and exploiting these opportunities. Stone tool assemblages from sites across North Africa and Arabia show rapid technological innovations during green periods, followed by more conservative tool traditions during arid phases. This suggests that environmental abundance allowed for experimentation and cultural exchange, while harsh conditions favored tried and true survival techniques that had been tested over generations. Genetic studies of modern populations provide additional evidence for these ancient movements. Y chromosome lineages found in both North and Sub-Saharan African populations today show patterns consistent with migrations during the last Green Sahara period. These genetic signatures tell of complex population movements that brought together people from across the continent in the vast grasslands that once covered the Sahara, creating genetic diversity patterns that persist in modern populations. The end of green periods was equally important in shaping human evolution. When the climate dried and the deserts returned, populations that had spread across vast areas were suddenly fragmented into isolated refugia. Some groups were trapped in shrinking oases, while others were forced to migrate to more hospitable regions. These population bottlenecks and founder effects may have played crucial roles in human genetic and cultural evolution, creating the conditions for rapid evolutionary change and cultural innovation. As we'll see, Understanding these green corridors is crucial to understanding how early humans developed the skills needed for desert survival. The cyclical nature of these climate changes meant that human populations repeatedly faced the challenge of adapting to increasingly arid conditions as their green worlds transformed into deserts around them. Chapter 3. The Science of Thirst. Water. In the desert, nothing else matters as much as this simple molecule that makes up more than half of your body. Understanding how early humans found, conserved, and managed water in arid environments reveals some of the most sophisticated survival strategies in human history. Techniques so effective that many are still used by desert peoples today. The human body is a terrible machine for desert survival by evolutionary standards. Unlike camels, which can lose up to 30% of their body weight in water and survive, or fennec foxes, which can live their entire lives without drinking, humans begin experiencing severe physiological stress after losing just 2 to 3% of their body water. At 10% water loss, we become delirious. At 15%, we die. This harsh reality meant that early humans crossing deserts had to become master hydrologists. They needed to understand not just where water could be found, but how to read the subtle signs that revealed hidden water sources in seemingly barren landscapes. Modern research with indigenous Australian Aborigines, whose ancestors survived in some of the world's most arid environments for over 50,000 years, reveals the sophistication of traditional water-finding techniques. Aboriginal water-finding knowledge, preserved in songs and stories passed down through hundreds of generations, demonstrates the kind of detailed environmental understanding that early desert crossers must have possessed. They could identify over 30 different plant species that indicate water sources, from desert oaks that signal deep groundwater to spinifex grass that grows near surface water. They knew that certain bird behaviors, like the way zebra finches fly in straight lines toward water in the early morning, could guide them to distant water holes. Archaeological evidence suggests that early humans developed similar abilities. At sites across the Arabian Peninsula, researchers have found evidence of human occupation consistently associated with fossil spring deposits and ancient lake beds. This isn't random. It shows that early humans were deliberately targeting areas where water was available, often in locations that would be impossible to find without intimate knowledge of the landscape. The discovery of ancient wells in the Sahara provides even more dramatic evidence of early water management. At sites in Libya and Sudan, archaeologists have uncovered elaborate water collection systems built thousands of years ago during the last wet period. These include rock-lined channels designed to collect runoff from rare rainstorms and underground storage chambers that could preserve water through extended dry periods. Stone tool analysis from desert sites reveals another crucial adaptation. Early humans developed specialized tools for water procurement. Pointed digging sticks, preserved in dry cave sites, show wear patterns consistent with excavating roots of water-bearing plants. Grinding stones found at oasis sites may have been used to process water-rich plant materials to extract every drop of moisture. The physiology of desert survival also shaped human evolution in subtle but important ways. Genetic studies suggest that populations from historically arid regions show adaptations for better water conservation. These include more efficient kidneys that can concentrate urine to extreme levels and enhanced ability to regulate body temperature through sweating, a cooling mechanism that, while water-intensive, is more efficient than the panting used by most mammals. Early humans also developed sophisticated strategies for water storage and transport. Ostrich eggshells, found at archaeological sites across Africa, were used as water containers capable of holding up to a liter of precious liquid. The smooth, non-porous surface of the shells made them ideal for long-term water storage, and their light weight made them practical for nomadic groups. Perhaps most remarkably, Early humans learned to recognize and exploit ephemeral water sources that appeared and disappeared with seasonal or annual cycles. Recent studies of ancient lake sediments in the Sahara show that even during generally arid periods, temporary lakes would form in certain locations following rare but intense rainstorms. The ability to predict and reach these temporary water sources required not just geographical knowledge, but also sophisticated understanding of weather patterns and seasonal cycles. The chemistry of desert survival also reveals the ingenuity of early water management. Analysis of mineral deposits at ancient campsites shows that early humans understood the differences between water sources. They knew which waters were safe to drink and which were contaminated with salts or other minerals that could worsen dehydration. This knowledge was literally life or death information that had to be passed down through generations with perfect accuracy. Social cooperation was essential for water management in desert environments. Evidence from multiple archaeological sites suggests that water sources were shared resources managed by entire communities. The largest and most reliable oases show evidence of complex societies that developed rules and traditions around water use, storage, and distribution. These early water management systems may have been among the first examples of resource management that required cooperation between multiple family groups. The seasonal nature of water availability also shaped migration patterns and social organization. Groups had to coordinate their movements to arrive at water sources at optimal times, after rains had replenished supplies, but before they evaporated or were depleted by wildlife. This required sophisticated communication networks and shared calendrical knowledge that could synchronize the movements of multiple groups across vast areas. Climate proxy data reveals that early humans became so skilled at water management that they could survive in areas that were significantly more arid than previously thought possible. Ice core data and ancient pollen records show that some of the periods when humans were present in desert regions were actually drier than the worst modern droughts. This suggests that traditional water finding and conservation techniques were far more effective than we previously realized. The legacy of these ancient water management skills persists today. Traditional Tuareg and Bedouin navigation techniques, passed down through thousands of years, still rely on many of the same principles that early humans must have used. Reading the landscape for signs of underground water, understanding seasonal patterns of rainfall and runoff, and maintaining detailed mental maps of reliable water sources across vast territories. Understanding how early humans solved the water challenge in desert environments reveals not just their ingenuity, but the depth of environmental knowledge required for survival in extreme conditions. This wasn't just about finding water. It was about understanding the complex relationships between climate, geology, biology, and hydrology that govern water availability in arid lands. Chapter 4. Reading the Invisible Map. Navigation across trackless deserts without instruments might seem impossible, yet early humans accomplished this feat with remarkable precision. The secret lies in understanding that the desert, far from being a featureless wasteland, is actually filled with subtle signs and patterns visible only to those trained to read them. Early humans developed navigation techniques so sophisticated that they challenge our modern assumptions about the cognitive capabilities of our ancestors. The foundation of ancient desert navigation lay in celestial observation. Early humans understood that the sun, moon, and stars provided reliable directional references that couldn't be erased by sandstorms or obscured by shifting dunes. Archaeological evidence from sites across North Africa includes stone circles and aligned structures that suggest sophisticated astronomical knowledge. These weren't just ceremonial sites. They were navigation aids that helped ancient travelers maintain their bearing across vast distances. The sun provided the most obvious navigational reference, but using it effectively required understanding that was far from simple. Early navigators had to account for seasonal variations in the sun's path, the effects of latitude on shadow directions, and the way atmospheric refraction could distort solar positions near the horizon. Stone sundials found at oasis sites suggest that some ancient desert peoples developed formal systems for solar navigation that were passed down through generations. Stellar navigation presented even greater challenges and opportunities. The North Star, Polaris, has served as a navigation reference for thousands of years, but its position in the sky changes over time due to axial precession. This means that the pole star that early humans used might have been a different star entirely. Analysis of ancient star charts carved into rock faces suggests that early navigators understood these changes and adjusted their techniques accordingly. The discovery of prehistoric star maps, carved into rock faces across the Sahara, provides compelling evidence of sophisticated astronomical knowledge. These petroglyphs show constellations and star patterns that can be dated by comparing them to astronomical records. Some appear to be teaching tools, showing the relationships between star positions and seasonal changes that would have been crucial for timing long-distance journeys. But celestial navigation was just one component of ancient wayfinding systems. Early humans also became master readers of terrestrial signs that revealed direction, distance, and destination. Wind patterns, barely perceptible to untrained observers, provided crucial navigational information. The shape and orientation of sand dunes reflect prevailing wind directions. Creating a landscape-scale compass rose for those who knew how to read it. Desert geomorphology provided another layer of navigational information. Early humans learned to recognize geological formations that could serve as landmarks across vast distances. Distinctive rock formations, visible from dozens of miles away in the clear desert air, served as navigation beacons. More subtly, they learned to read the patterns of erosion and deposition that revealed the direction of seasonal water flow, pointing toward oases and seasonal water sources. The behavior of animals provided crucial navigational cues that early humans exploited with remarkable sophistication. Desert animals must travel regularly to water sources, and their trails, though invisible to casual observation, create subtle pathways across the landscape that trained observers can follow. Bird flight patterns, especially in the early morning and evening, indicate the directions of water sources. Even insect behavior provides directional information. Certain beetles and ants navigate using polarized light patterns that can be read by humans who understand their behavior. Traditional navigation techniques preserved by modern desert peoples reveal the complexity of these ancient systems. Tuareg navigators in the Sahara use over 160 different stellar and terrestrial reference points to navigate across the desert. They can determine their position and direction using the shape of sand dunes, the color of the sand, the types of rocks present, and subtle changes in vegetation. These skills require years of training and represent the accumulation of knowledge passed down through countless generations. Archaeological evidence suggests that early humans developed formal systems for sharing navigational knowledge. Cache sites, locations where tools, supplies, or information were stored for future use, are found along ancient travel routes across the Sahara and Arabian Peninsula. Some of these sites contain what appear to be navigation aids, stones arranged in patterns that might represent star positions or directional markers, or carved symbols that could represent landmark features. The cognitive demands of desert navigation may have played a significant role in human brain evolution. Maintaining accurate mental maps across distances of hundreds of miles, while keeping track of multiple environmental variables and their seasonal changes, required sophisticated spatial processing abilities. Some researchers suggest that the navigational challenges faced by early human migrants contributed to the evolution of the complex spatial reasoning abilities that distinguish modern humans from other species. Modern research using GPS tracking of traditional navigators has revealed the extraordinary precision of ancient techniques. Tuareg guides, using only traditional methods, can navigate to specific locations hundreds of miles away with accuracy that rivals modern GPS systems. They accomplish this by maintaining constant awareness of multiple navigational reference systems and continuously updating their mental maps based on subtle environmental changes. The social aspects of navigation were equally important. Long-distance desert travel required cooperation between multiple individuals with different but complementary skills. Some members of a group specialized in celestial navigation, others in reading animal signs or geological formations. This specialization required complex systems for sharing and coordinating navigational knowledge, the beginnings of the collaborative decision-making that would become crucial to human success. Climate data reveals that ancient navigators had to adapt their techniques to changing environmental conditions. As green periods gave way to arid phases, familiar landmarks disappeared under shifting sands, and reliable water sources dried up. Successful navigation required not just knowledge of current conditions, but understanding of how landscapes changed over timescales ranging from seasons to centuries. The preservation of navigational knowledge across generations required sophisticated memory techniques and cultural transmission systems. Traditional societies developed songs, stories, and rituals that encoded crucial navigational information in memorable forms. The Australian Aboriginal songlines, traditional songs that encode geographical information in mythological narratives, provide a model for how early humans might have preserved and transmitted complex navigational knowledge across generations. The accuracy of ancient navigation systems is revealed by the archaeological record of long-distance connections between distant sites. Stone tool styles, artistic motifs, and even specific types of raw materials moved across distances of thousands of miles, indicating regular and reliable contact between widely separated populations. This couldn't have happened without navigation techniques that were both accurate and teachable to new generations of travelers. Chapter 5. Tools of Survival. The difference between life and death in the desert often comes down to having the right tool at the crucial moment. For early humans venturing into hostile arid environments, their stone tools weren't just implements. They were life support systems that enabled survival in places where the unarmed human body would quickly fail. The evolution of desert survival tools reveals a story of innovation under pressure that rivals any modern technological development and demonstrates problem-solving abilities that challenge our assumptions about ancient human intelligence. The archaeological record from desert sites shows a clear and remarkable pattern. Tools become more sophisticated and specialized as environments become more challenging. At sites dating to wetter periods, stone tools are relatively simple and show evidence of being made and used quickly, often discarded after a single use. But at sites from arid periods, the tools show evidence of careful planning, standardized designs, and specialized functions that could mean the difference between survival and death in harsh conditions. This isn't just technological evolution. It has evidence of humans adapting their entire relationship with technology in response to environmental stress. The sophistication of desert tool technology becomes apparent when we examine the manufacturing techniques required to create effective implements. Creating a sharp, durable stone tool from raw rock requires understanding principles of fracture mechanics, material science, and ergonomic design that wouldn't be formally described by science for thousands of years. The toolmaker had to understand how different types of stone would break under stress, how to control the direction and force of impacts to create predictable fracture patterns, and how to shape tools that would remain functional under the extreme conditions of desert use. One of the most important innovations was the development of composite tools, implements made from multiple materials combined to create capabilities that none could provide alone. Hafted stone knives, with carefully shaped stone blades attached to wooden handles using plant-based adhesives, provided the leverage and control needed for efficient butchering of scarce game animals. These weren't simple lashing jobs, but sophisticated engineering projects that required understanding of stress distribution, material properties, and joint design principles. The adhesives used to create these composite tools reveal another dimension of ancient technological sophistication. Analysis of residues on ancient tools shows that early humans developed complex recipes for creating strong, durable bonds between stone and wood. These adhesives were made from tree resins, plant saps, beeswax, and even blood, combined in precise proportions and often heated to specific temperatures to achieve optimal bonding properties. Some adhesive formulations show evidence of additives like crushed charcoal or plant fibers that improved strength and flexibility. The chemistry of toolmaking reveals the sophistication of ancient desert technologies in ways that continue to surprise researchers. Analysis of stone tool edges using electron microscopy shows that early humans understood how to create and maintain incredibly sharp cutting surfaces that rival modern precision instruments. Some stone blades found at desert sites are sharper than modern surgical instruments, with cutting edges just a few molecules wide. Maintaining this level of sharpness in abrasive desert conditions required techniques for resharpening and reconditioning tools that represent sophisticated understanding of material science and edge geometry. The standardization of tool designs across vast desert regions suggests something even more remarkable: the existence of technical traditions that could preserve and transmit complex manufacturing knowledge across thousands of miles and hundreds of years. Identical tool-making techniques found at sites separated by enormous distances indicate that successful innovations were preserved and spread through cultural transmission networks that functioned with remarkable efficiency and fidelity. Digging tools were equally crucial for desert survival, and their design shows evidence of specialization that reflects deep understanding of both human biomechanics and soil mechanics. Pointed sticks preserved in dry cave sites show wear patterns consistent with excavating roots of water-bearing plants, digging for buried water sources, and creating shelter in sandy or soft ground. Some of these tools show evidence of fire hardening, a technique that involves carefully heating the wood to create a much harder and more durable point without making it so brittle that it breaks under stress. The physics of fire hardening reveals the sophistication of this apparently simple technique. The process requires heating wood to specific temperatures, hot enough to drive off moisture and alter the cellular structure, but not so hot that it burns or becomes brittle. This requires precise temperature control and timing that can only be achieved through deep understanding of fire management and wood properties. Different wood species require different heating regimens, meaning that successful fire hardening required botanical knowledge as well as pyrotechnology expertise. Fire-making tools represent perhaps the most critical desert survival technology, and their design shows evidence of engineering sophistication that challenges our assumptions about ancient technological capabilities. In environments where daytime temperatures could exceed 50 degrees Celsius, 122 degrees Fahrenheit, and nighttime temperatures could drop to near freezing, the ability to create fire on demand was essential for survival, food preparation, tool maintenance, and protection from predators. Bow drill sets found at desert sites show remarkable standardization of design that suggests the existence of formal, technical specifications that were maintained across generations. The wood species used for different components were carefully selected based on their friction properties, durability, and availability. The hearth boards show precisely shaped notches that control airflow and tinder placement. The spindles are shaped to specific diameter tolerances that optimize the balance between friction generation and durability. The physics of friction firemaking in desert conditions required special adaptations that reveal understanding of thermodynamics and combustion chemistry. Low humidity made tinder materials extremely dry and combustible, but also made it difficult to maintain the fine gradations of heat needed to progress from friction-generated heat to glowing ember to sustained flame. Desert peoples developed specialized tinder preparations using plant fibers, animal fur, and even certain fungi that could catch the smallest sparks and nurture them into usable fire. Water procurement tools show some of the most ingenious adaptations to desert conditions, revealing innovation under pressure that rivals modern engineering solutions. Hollow plant stems, carved wooden tubes, and even specially shaped stones were used to extract water from tiny seeps and cracks in rocks where water might collect after rare rainfalls. Some tools show wear patterns suggesting they were used to tap into the water-storing tissues of desert plants, techniques that required precise knowledge of plant anatomy and seasonal water storage patterns. The design of these water extraction tools reveals understanding of fluid mechanics and capillary action that predates formal scientific descriptions of these phenomena by thousands of years. Some tools show evidence of internal modifications, grooves, ridges, and surface textures that would increase water extraction efficiency by manipulating surface tension and flow dynamics. The sophistication of these modifications suggests systematic experimentation and refinement over many generations. Storage and transport technologies were equally important and show evidence of material science knowledge that rivals modern container design. Ostrich eggshells, found at sites across Africa and the Middle East, were carefully prepared to create water containers that could hold up to a liter of precious liquid, while remaining light enough for nomadic transport. The preparation process was complex and required understanding of shell structure, stress distribution, and failure modes. The preparation of ostrich eggshell containers involved multiple steps that each required specific technical knowledge. The eggs had to be emptied through carefully drilled holes that were positioned to minimize stress concentrations. The interior had to be cleaned using tools and techniques that could remove organic matter without damaging the shell structure. The shells were often treated with preservatives that would prevent bacterial growth and maintain structural integrity over years of use. Some shells show evidence of repair techniques that allowed valuable containers to be kept functional even after damage. These repairs used organic adhesives, fiber reinforcement, and even mechanical fasteners made from thorns or small bones. The sophistication of these repair techniques suggests that water containers were treasured possessions that were maintained and preserved with great care over extended periods. Clothing and personal protection tools reveal another dimension of desert survival technology that required integration of multiple technical disciplines. Scrapers designed for processing animal hides into leather show specialized edge geometries that can efficiently remove fat and tissue while preserving the integrity of the hide. This was crucial because properly prepared leather provided protection from both solar radiation during the day and heat loss during cold desert nights. The hide processing techniques used by desert peoples required understanding of biochemistry, material science, and manufacturing processes that weren't formally described until the modern era. Different scraper designs were used for different stages of hide processing, each optimized for specific tasks. Some were designed for removing hair and surface tissue, others for thinning the hide to optimal thickness, and still others for final finishing that would create leather with specific properties. The development of throwing weapons specifically adapted for desert hunting shows remarkable innovation in aerodynamic design and projectile mechanics. Throwing sticks found at desert sites have aerodynamic profiles that differ significantly from those found in other environments. These differences reflect adaptations to the unique hunting challenges of open desert environments where game animals could be spotted at great distances, but approached only with difficulty due to lack of cover. The design optimization evident in desert throwing weapons reveals understanding of ballistics and aerodynamics that predates formal scientific study of these subjects by millennia. Computer modeling of ancient throwing stick designs shows that they were optimized for maximum range and accuracy in the low-density air conditions common at high altitudes and in arid climates. Some designs show evidence of systematic testing and refinement that rivals modern engineering development processes. Tool maintenance in desert conditions required special techniques and materials that demonstrate adaptive problem-solving under extreme constraints. Abrasive desert sands could quickly dull cutting edges, while extreme temperature fluctuations could crack or fracture stone tools. Ancient toolmakers developed techniques for repair and rejuvenation that allowed valuable implements to be kept functional far longer than would be possible with simple replacement strategies. The maintenance techniques used by desert peoples often involved reshaping damaged tools for new purposes rather than simply discarding them. Broken spear points might be reworked into scrapers. Damaged cutting tools could be modified for use as digging implements, and worn grinding stones could be repurposed for other functions. This adaptive reuse required understanding of tool design principles and manufacturing techniques that allowed for systematic modification and repurposing. Why desert survival may have played such an important role in human brain evolution. Successful desert navigation required maintaining accurate mental maps across distances of hundreds of miles while continuously integrating new environmental information and updating route plans based on changing conditions. This required working memory capacities, spatial reasoning abilities, and pattern recognition skills that push the limits of cognitive performance. Archaeological evidence suggests that early humans developed formal systems for sharing and preserving navigational knowledge that went beyond simple oral transmission. Cache sites, locations where tools, supplies, or information were stored for future use, are found along ancient travel routes across the Sahara and Arabian Peninsula. Some of these sites contain what appear to be navigation aids, stones arranged in patterns that might represent star positions or directional markers, carved symbols that could represent landmark features, or even primitive maps showing the relationships between different routes and destinations. The standardization of these navigation markers across vast regions suggests the existence of shared cultural traditions that could preserve and transmit complex technical knowledge across multiple generations and between different social groups. The consistency of navigation symbols found at sites separated by thousands of miles and hundreds of years indicates that successful navigation techniques were preserved and spread through cultural transmission networks of remarkable efficiency and fidelity. Modern research using GPS tracking of traditional navigators has revealed the extraordinary precision of ancient navigation techniques. Studies of Tuareg guides using only traditional methods have shown that they can navigate to specific locations hundreds of miles away with accuracy that rivals modern GPS systems. They accomplish this by maintaining constant awareness of multiple navigational reference systems and continuously updating their mental maps based on subtle environmental changes that would be invisible to untrained observers. The social aspects of navigation were equally important and required complex coordination between multiple individuals with different but complementary skills. Long-distance desert travel required cooperation between people with specialized knowledge. Some might be experts in stellar navigation, others in reading animal signs or geological formations. This specialization required complex systems for sharing and coordinating navigational knowledge and may have been among the earliest examples of the collaborative decision-making that would become crucial to human success. Climate data reveals that ancient navigators had to adapt their techniques to changing environmental conditions over timescales ranging from seasons to centuries. As green periods gave way to arid phases, familiar landmarks disappeared under shifting sands. Reliable water sources dried up, and animal migration patterns changed. Successful navigation required not just knowledge of current conditions, but understanding of how landscapes changed over time and the ability to adapt navigation strategies to new environmental realities. The preservation of navigational knowledge across generations required sophisticated memory techniques and cultural transmission systems that demonstrate the remarkable information storage capabilities of oral cultures. Traditional societies developed songs, stories, and rituals that encoded crucial navigational information in memorable forms that could be preserved with extraordinary accuracy over hundreds of generations. The Australian Aboriginal songlines provide a model for how early humans might have preserved and transmitted complex navigational knowledge across vast distances and long periods of time. The accuracy and reliability of ancient navigation systems is revealed by the archaeological record of long-distance connections between distant sites. Stone tool styles, artistic motifs, and specific types of raw materials moved across distances of thousands of miles with regularity that indicates routine and reliable contact between widely separated populations. This couldn't have happened without navigation techniques that were both accurate and teachable to new generations of travelers. Chapter 6. The Great Crossings. 2 million years ago, a group of early humans stood at a crossroads that would determine the fate of our species. Behind them lay the familiar landscapes of Africa, the continent, where humanity was born and had spent the first several million years of its existence. Ahead lay vast expanses of desert and unknown lands that no human had ever seen. The decision they made to venture into that unknown would launch humanity on the greatest migration in Earth's history and transform our species from African hominins into global colonizers. The first great desert crossing was undertaken by Homo erectus around 1.8 million years ago, and the magnitude of this achievement becomes clear when we consider what these early humans were facing. These weren't modern humans with our large brains and sophisticated technologies. They were early hominins with distinctive upright posture, prominent brow ridges, and brains roughly 2/3 the size of modern humans. Yet they developed the body plan, technological capabilities, and social organization needed for long-distance travel across some of the world's most challenging environments. Archaeological evidence from sites like the Mirage in Georgia shows that these early migrants had reached the Caucasus Mountains by 1.85 million years ago, having somehow crossed the entire breadth of Africa and the Middle Eastern deserts to get there. The fossil remains found at the Mirage reveal individuals who were smaller and more lightly built than later Homo erectus populations. Yet they had accomplished a journey of at least 6,000 miles from their African homeland. This represents one of the most remarkable feats of endurance and navigation in the history of life on Earth. The route these early migrants took is still being reconstructed through archaeological discoveries that reveal the complexity of their journey. Stone tools found in Algeria and dated to 2.2 million years ago show clear similarities to tools from East Africa, suggesting a northern route across the Sahara that would have required crossing hundreds of miles of what would become some of the world's most hostile desert terrain. But the tools also show local innovations and adaptations, indicating that these weren't simple one-way migrations, but complex movements involving extended stays, cultural development, and adaptation to new environments. The timing of these early crossings was clearly linked to climate cycles, but even during favorable climatic periods, the journey would have required extraordinary planning and survival skills. Evidence from the site of Ain Boucherit in Algeria provides a remarkable glimpse into the lives of these early desert crossers. Stone tools and cut-marked animal bones dating to 2.2 million years ago show that early humans were successfully hunting and processing large game animals in what is now the heart of the Sahara Desert. The sophistication of their tool-making and the diversity of animals they were able to hunt suggests that they had developed specialized techniques for desert survival that went far beyond simple scavenging or opportunistic hunting. The animal bones from Ain Boucherit tell a story of remarkable adaptability and hunting prowess. The site contains remains of elephants, hippos, crocodiles, mastodons, and various species of antelope, all showing clear evidence of human butchery. The cut marks on these bones are precisely placed to maximize meat extraction and marrow access, indicating that these early humans had developed sophisticated understanding of animal anatomy and butchery techniques. This wasn't desperate survival. It was systematic, efficient exploitation of available resources by people who had mastered their environment. The stone tools from these early sites reveal another crucial aspect of desert crossing success: technological innovation, driven by environmental challenges. The tools show evidence of systematic production methods, standardized designs, and specialized functions that indicate formal tool-making traditions were being maintained and transmitted across generations of desert travelers. Some tools show evidence of long-distance transport, suggesting that successful implements were carried across hundreds of miles of desert rather than being made and discarded locally. The second great phase of desert crossing occurred between 130,000 and 50,000 years ago, when anatomically modern humans began their expansion out of Africa. But this migration was fundamentally different from the earlier Homo erectus dispersal. These modern humans, with brains identical to ours and sophisticated technological capabilities, had developed much more advanced survival strategies and social organizations that would prove crucial for successful desert crossing. Archaeological sites in Saudi Arabia, dated to 120,000 years ago, have yielded some of the oldest evidence of modern human presence outside Africa, and the artifacts found at these sites reveal the sophistication of early modern human desert survival strategies. Stone tools found at these locations show clear similarities to tools from the Nile Valley, indicating technological continuity across vast distances. But they also display innovations that suggest rapid adaptation to Arabian desert conditions: specialized scrapers for processing desert plants, pointed tools for extracting water from rock crevices, and composite implements that combine multiple functions in single tools. The presence of these tools at sites associated with ancient lakes indicates that early modern humans were extraordinarily skilled at locating and exploiting water resources in arid environments. The lakes themselves were often seasonal or ephemeral, appearing after rare but intense rainfalls and disappearing during dry periods. Successfully utilizing these resources would have required not just the ability to find them, but also sophisticated understanding of seasonal cycles and weather patterns that could predict when and where water would be available. Human footprints discovered at the site of Al-Athar in Saudi Arabia provide extraordinary, direct evidence of these ancient desert crossings that brings us face to face with our ancestors in the most immediate way possible. The footprints, dated to between 112,000 and 120,000 years ago, show groups of early humans walking alongside elephants, camels, and other large mammals around the shores of an ancient lake. The preservation of these footprints in what is now one of the world's most arid regions is almost miraculous. They were covered by protective sediments shortly after being made and remained buried until recent archaeological excavations uncovered them. Analysis of the Al-Athar footprints reveals remarkable details about ancient human behavior and social organization. The arrangement of the human footprints suggests that people were traveling in coordinated groups, possibly hunting the large mammals whose tracks are preserved alongside theirs. Some of the human tracks show evidence of individuals moving in deliberate stalking patterns around the larger animals, indicating sophisticated cooperative hunting strategies that required communication and planning between multiple hunters. The route taken by these early modern humans has been traced using a combination of archaeological evidence, genetic studies, and paleoclimatic reconstruction. Stone tools with distinctly African characteristics have been found across Arabia and into southern Asia, following what researchers called the southern route out of Africa. This route took advantage of coastal areas and river valleys where water and resources were more reliable than in the deep desert interior. but it still required crossing hundreds of miles of challenging terrain. But the most dramatic evidence for the scale and success of these desert crossings comes from the speed with which humans spread across the globe once they had mastered desert survival techniques. Within just a few tens of thousands of years after the first successful crossings of the Arabian Peninsula, human populations had reached Southeast Asia, Australia, and eventually Europe and the Americas. This rapid global dispersal suggests that the skills developed for desert crossing were readily adaptable to other challenging environments. The genetic evidence for these migrations is written in the DNA of modern populations in patterns that can be read like a molecular history book. Studies of mitochondrial DNA of Y chromosome lineages show clear signatures of population movements that correspond to periods when desert crossings would have been possible. Populations in North Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia all show genetic markers consistent with migrations during the last major humid period in the Sahara and Arabian Peninsula. One of the most remarkable aspects of these ancient desert crossings was their repeatability and sustainability over long periods. This wasn't a single desperate migration by a small group of refugees. Instead, archaeological evidence shows that humans repeatedly crossed desert barriers over periods of hundreds of thousands of years, suggesting that they had developed reliable and teachable techniques for desert survival that could be maintained across multiple generations. The site of Jubba Oasis in Saudi Arabia provides compelling evidence for this pattern of repeated desert crossing. The site shows evidence of at least 5 separate periods of human occupation spanning from 400,000 to 55,000 years ago. Each occupation period corresponds to climatic data showing increased rainfall and lake formation in the region. This pattern suggests that human populations were capable of tracking climate changes and timing their migrations to take advantage of optimal conditions, a level of environmental awareness and long-term planning that rivals modern meteorological prediction. The tools and artifacts left behind by these ancient desert crossers show progressive improvements in technology and survival strategies over time. Early sites contain relatively simple stone tools and basic evidence of resource exploitation. But later sites show evidence of specialized implements designed specifically for desert conditions. Tools for water extraction, processing desert plants, hunting in open terrain, and creating shelter from extreme weather. This technological progression suggests that knowledge was being accumulated and preserved across generations of desert travelers. Perhaps most remarkably, some groups appear to have survived in desert environments even when conditions became more arid than they had been during initial colonization. Sites in the Negev Desert show evidence of continuous human occupation through periods when the region was significantly drier than it is today. This suggests that some human populations developed desert survival skills, so sophisticated that they could persist in areas that had become effectively uninhabitable for other large mammals. The social implications of these desert crossings were profound and lasting. Successfully crossing thousands of miles of desert required cooperation, planning, and resource sharing on a scale that may have been unprecedented in human evolution. Groups had to coordinate their movements, share knowledge about routes and water sources, and provide mutual support during the most challenging portions of their journeys. The social innovations developed for desert crossing, cooperative decision-making, resource sharing, knowledge preservation, and group coordination became fundamental aspects of human social organization. Evidence from multiple sites suggests that these crossings were undertaken by individual family groups, but by larger social networks that could provide the redundancy and expertise needed for such challenging journeys. Stone tool traditions, artistic styles, and even specific raw materials moved across vast distances, indicating regular contact and exchange between populations separated by hundreds or thousands of miles. This suggests that desert crossing created and maintained social networks that spanned continents. The psychological challenges of desert crossing may have been as important as the physical ones in shaping human evolution. Crossing a desert required maintaining group cohesion and morale during weeks or months of travel through landscapes that offered constant reminders of the lethal consequences of failure. The development of cultural mechanisms for managing these challenges through storytelling, ritual, shared decision-making, and collective memory may have been crucial innovations that enabled these remarkable journeys and contributed to the development of the complex symbolic and social capabilities that characterize modern humans. Chapter 7. Masters of the Mirage. Understanding how early humans survived in the desert requires us to appreciate not just their physical adaptations, but their psychological resilience in the face of an environment that seems designed to break the human spirit. The desert is a place where mirages mock the thirsty, where familiar landmarks disappear beneath shifting sands, and where the margin between life and death can be measured in hours. Yet our ancestors not only survived these challenges, they thrived in them. The psychological challenges of desert survival begin with the landscape itself. The vast, seemingly endless expanses of sand and rock can induce a form of sensory deprivation that modern psychologists recognize as extremely stressful. Without the familiar reference points of forests or grasslands, the very textures, sounds, and landmarks that normally help humans orient themselves, desert travelers face a constant battle against disorientation and despair. Early humans developed sophisticated mental strategies for coping with these challenges. Evidence from rock art sites across the Sahara suggests that ancient desert peoples created elaborate, conceptual maps of their territories that went far beyond simple geographical knowledge. These mental maps included not just the locations of water sources and landmarks, but complex associations between landscape features, seasonal changes, animal behaviors, and astronomical events. The famous songlines of Australian Aboriginal peoples provide insight into how such complex knowledge systems might have worked. These traditional songs, some of which are believed to be tens of thousands of years old, encode detailed geographical and environmental information in memorable narrative form. A single songline can contain information about hundreds of miles of territory, including the locations of water sources, seasonal food availability, and safe routes through dangerous terrain. Archaeological evidence suggests that early desert peoples developed similar systems. Petroglyphs found at sites across North Africa show repeated motifs that appear to represent both geographical features and abstract concepts. Some researchers believe these rock carvings served as way station libraries where crucial survival information was preserved in symbolic form for future travelers. The physiological stress of desert travel also required psychological adaptation. Modern research has shown that the combination of extreme heat, dehydration, and physical exhaustion can produce hallucinations, paranoia, and impaired decision-making. Exactly the conditions where clear thinking is most crucial for survival. Early desert travelers had to develop mental disciplines that could maintain cognitive function even under severe physiological stress. Traditional meditation and concentration techniques, preserved by modern desert peoples, may provide clues about ancient psychological survival strategies. Tuareg and Bedouin traditions include specific mental exercises designed to maintain focus and emotional equilibrium during long desert journeys. These techniques involve controlled breathing, repetitive mental exercises, and structured ways of thinking about time and distance that help travelers maintain psychological stability during extended periods of hardship. The social psychology of desert survival was equally important. Group dynamics that work well in resource-rich environments can become deadly in the desert, where stress, competition for scarce resources, and the constant presence of danger can quickly destroy social cohesion. Successful desert crossing required social innovations that could maintain cooperation and mutual support even under the most challenging conditions. Evidence from archaeological sites suggests that early desert peoples developed formal systems for group decision-making and conflict resolution. Cache sites along ancient travel routes often contain not just supplies, but arrangements of stones or other markers that may have served as neutral meeting places where different groups could interact and exchange information. The standardization of these sites across vast areas suggests that they were part of well-established cultural traditions. The role of leadership in desert survival also required special adaptations. In environments where a single bad decision could doom an entire group, traditional leadership structures based on age, gender, or social status might not be sufficient. Evidence from traditional desert societies suggests that leadership during dangerous journeys was often based on demonstrated expertise rather than conventional social hierarchy. The best navigator, the most skilled tracker, or the person with the most extensive knowledge of a particular route might assume temporary leadership regardless of their normal social position. Risk assessment and decision-making in desert environments required cognitive skills that pushed the limits of human mental capacity. Desert travelers had to continuously evaluate multiple sources of information: weather patterns, animal behavior, vegetation conditions, water availability, and integrate them into coherent survival strategies. A decision to change route based on barely perceptible environmental cues might mean the difference between reaching safety and perishing in the wasteland. Modern cognitive science has shown that this kind of complex environmental decision-making requires extraordinary working memory capacity and pattern recognition abilities. The fact that early humans could develop and maintain these skills suggests that desert survival may have been a significant factor in the evolution of human cognitive capabilities. The mental demands of navigating trackless wastes while managing scarce resources and maintaining group cohesion may have selected for the enhanced information processing abilities that distinguish modern human cognition. The temporal psychology of desert survival also required special adaptations. In environments where daily survival routines can consume enormous amounts of time and energy, maintaining long-term planning abilities becomes crucial. Desert travelers had to balance immediate survival needs with longer-term strategic goals, often while experiencing the disorienting effects of extreme physical stress. Traditional timekeeping methods used by desert peoples reveal sophisticated approaches to managing temporal awareness in environments where normal circadian and seasonal cues might be disrupted. Some groups developed elaborate systems based on star positions, shadow lengths, and natural phenomena that could maintain accurate temporal orientation, even during extended periods of travel through unfamiliar territory. The emotional psychology of desert survival required perhaps the most profound adaptations. The desert is a place of extremes, scorching days and frigid nights, feast and famine, the ecstasy of finding water, and the despair of losing the way. Managing these emotional extremes while maintaining the clear thinking needed for survival required psychological skills that modern humans often struggle to develop even with the benefit of professional training. Evidence from traditional desert culture suggests that emotional regulation techniques were often embedded in religious or spiritual practices that gave meaning and context to the hardships of desert travel. The ability to interpret suffering as part of a larger pattern or purpose appears to have been crucial for maintaining the psychological resilience needed for long-distance desert journeys. The development of these psychological survival skills had implications that extended far beyond desert environments. The mental disciplines required for desert survival, long-term planning, environmental awareness, social cooperation under stress, emotional regulation, and complex decision-making became part of the cognitive toolkit that enabled humans to succeed in virtually every environment on Earth. Modern research with traditional navigators has shown that some of these ancient psychological skills persist today. Studies of Pacific Island navigators, Arctic hunters, and desert guides reveal cognitive abilities that exceed those of people. Raised in modern technological societies in specific domains related to environmental awareness and spatial reasoning. These skills appear to be maintained through cultural transmission systems that preserve ancient knowledge in living form. The legacy of ancient desert psychology can be seen in the remarkable adaptability that characterizes our species. The same mental flexibility that allowed early humans to survive in hostile deserts later enabled the development of agriculture, cities, and ultimately technological civilization. The psychological foundations of human cultural evolution may have been forged in the crucible of desert survival. Chapter 8. When the green world died around 5,500 years ago, one of the most dramatic environmental transformations in Earth's recent history began to unfold across North Africa. The vast grasslands of the Green Sahara, which had supported complex human societies for thousands of years, began their final transformation into the hyper-arid desert we know today. This wasn't a gradual change. In some areas, the transition from savanna to desert happened in just a few centuries, forcing the human inhabitants to face one of the greatest environmental challenges in our species' history. The end of the Green Sahara wasn't just a climate change. It was a civilizational catastrophe that rivaled any natural disaster in recorded history. Archaeological evidence shows that at its peak, around 8,000 years ago, the Green Sahara supported populations that may have numbered in the millions. These weren't simple hunter-gatherer bands, but complex societies that had developed pottery, domesticated cattle, and created some of the world's first permanent settlements in what is now the heart of the Sahara Desert. The speed of the transformation was breathtaking. Lake sediment cores from across the Sahara show that many of the region's largest lakes dried up completely within just a few hundred years. Rivers that had flowed for millennia disappeared, their beds now marked only by fossil channels buried beneath tons of sand. Pollen records show that forests gave way to grasslands. Grasslands became sparse scrubland. And finally, even the hardiest desert plants disappeared from vast areas. The human response to this catastrophe reveals both the fragility and the resilience of our species. Some populations, caught in areas that dried up most rapidly, simply disappeared from the archaeological record. Their settlements were abandoned, their burial sites left empty, their rock art galleries silent testimony to lives that had once flourished in landscapes that became uninhabitable almost overnight. But other populations responded with remarkable adaptability. As their traditional territories became uninhabitable, they began some of the most ambitious migrations in human history. Genetic evidence shows that during this period, populations from the drying Sahara spread in all directions, north to Burcho, the Mediterranean coast, south into sub-Saharan Africa, and east toward the Nile Valley. These weren't random flights of refugees, but organized movements that would reshape the demographic landscape of an entire continent. The migration to the Nile Valley was particularly significant. As the Sahara dried up, the Nile became a refuge for populations fleeing the expanding desert. The concentration of people along the river led to increased competition for resources, but it also created the conditions for one of history's most remarkable civilizational developments. Many researchers believe that the pressure created by climate refugees from the Sahara was a crucial factor in the emergence of ancient Egyptian civilization. The archaeological record from this period shows evidence of rapid cultural evolution, driven by environmental stress. Pottery styles, tool technologies, and artistic traditions that had remained stable for thousands of years suddenly began changing rapidly. This wasn't just adaptation to new environments. It was innovation under pressure that would have lasting impacts on human cultural development. The collapse of the Green Sahara also reveals the sophisticated environmental knowledge that ancient peoples had developed. As conditions became increasingly marginal, human settlements concentrated around the most reliable water sources. Sites from this period show evidence of water management technologies, wells, cisterns, and irrigation systems that suggest ancient peoples understood that they were facing a long-term environmental challenge that required technological solutions. Some populations developed what might be called desert adaptation strategies that allowed them to persist in areas that were becoming increasingly arid. These groups developed specialized technologies for finding and conserving water, modified their social organization to cope with resource scarcity, and created cultural traditions that preserved crucial survival knowledge. The descendants of these populations would become the ancestors of historical desert peoples like the Tuareg and Bedouin. The genetic consequences of the Saharan drying were profound and long-lasting. Population bottlenecks created by environmental stress led to founder effects that can still be traced in the DNA of modern African populations. Y chromosome studies show clear evidence of population expansions from North Africa into other parts of the continent during this period, carrying genetic signatures that persist to this day. The cultural impact was equally significant. The dispersal of Saharan populations appears to have spread technologies, artistic traditions, and possibly even languages across much of Africa. Rock art styles that first appeared in the Green Sahara can be found scattered across the continent, following patterns that match genetic evidence for population movements. The development of pastoralism, the herding of cattle, goats, and sheep, may have been partly a response to the drying climate, and these technologies spread with migrating populations. Climate data reveals that the drying wasn't uniform across the Sahara. Some areas retained favorable conditions much longer than others, creating islands of habitability in an increasingly hostile landscape. These refugia became concentration points for human populations and may have served as were favors, staging areas for longer distance migrations. The cultural developments that occurred in these isolated communities may have had disproportionate influence on later human history. The psychological impact of watching one's homeland transform into an uninhabitable wasteland can hardly be imagined. Traditional ecological knowledge that had been passed down through hundreds of generations suddenly became obsolete. Landmarks disappeared, familiar plants and animals vanished, and the environmental cues that people had used for navigation and survival for millennia were erased by shifting sands. Yet some populations found ways to preserve and adapt their traditional knowledge to new circumstances. Oral traditions maintained by modern Saharan peoples contain what appear to be extremely ancient references to lakes, rivers, and forests in areas that have been desert for thousands of years. These traditions may represent some of the oldest preserved environmental knowledge in human culture, passed down through more than 200 generations of desert dwellers. The end of the Green Sahara also marked the beginning of the Sahara's role as a barrier between North and Sub-Saharan Africa. For thousands of years, the grasslands and rivers of the Green Sahara had facilitated contact and exchange between different parts of the continent. The transformation to desert created what geographers call the Saharan filter, a barrier that significantly reduced genetic and cultural exchange between North and Sub-Saharan Africa. Modern climate models suggest that similar rapid environmental transformations could happen again. The Sahara's transition between wet and dry states appears to be inherently unstable, with small changes in orbital parameters or ocean circulation potentially triggering rapid shifts between drastically different climate regimes. Understanding How ancient populations cope with these changes provides crucial insights into how modern societies might adapt to rapid climate change. The legacy of the Green Sahara's collapse can be seen in the remarkable diversity of human adaptations to arid environments found across North Africa and the Middle East today. The survival strategies, technologies, and cultural traditions that enabled ancient peoples to survive the Great Drying continue to serve their descendants in some of the world's most challenging environments. Perhaps most remarkably, the archaeological record suggests that some human populations not only survived the collapse of the Green Sahara, but actually thrived in the newly created desert environments. These populations developed what might be called extreme desert specialization, cultural and technological adaptations that allowed them to exploit resources and opportunities that existed only in hyper-arid environments. Their success in transforming catastrophe into opportunity represents one of the most remarkable examples of human adaptability in our species' history. Chapter 9. Genetic Footprints in the Sand. The story of human desert crossings is written not just in stones and bones, but in the very DNA that flows through our veins today. Every person on Earth carries genetic markers that tell the tale of ancient journeys across impossible landscapes, molecular memories of ancestors who ventured into trackless wastes and emerged to populate continents. These genetic footprints in the sand reveal the true scope and impact of humanity's greatest migration adventures. Modern genetic analysis has revolutionized our understanding of ancient human migrations. By studying variations in mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down through the maternal line, and Y chromosome markers inherited through fathers, scientists can trace population movements with extraordinary precision. These genetic chronometers reveal not just where ancient peoples went, but when they traveled, how many made the journey, and what happened to them along the way. The genetic signature of the first great desert crossing by Homo erectus can still be detected in modern populations, though it requires sophisticated analysis to separate these ancient signals from more recent population movements. Studies of populations in the Caucasus region, where some of the earliest evidence of humans outside Africa has been found, show genetic markers that appear to trace back to African populations from nearly 2 million years ago. More recent migrations have left clearer genetic footprints. The expansion of modern humans out of Africa between 60,000 and 100,000 years ago created genetic signatures that can be traced with remarkable precision. All non-African populations today share common ancestors who made this journey, carrying with them a subset of the genetic diversity found in African populations. The southern route out of Africa, which took early modern humans across the Arabian Peninsula, has left particularly clear genetic traces. Populations in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Australia all show genetic markers consistent with descent from a small founding population that crossed the Arabian Desert during a period when climate conditions were more favorable than today. The genetic diversity of these populations, lower than that found in Africa, but higher than that found in later migrations to Europe and the Americas, tells the story of a successful but limited migration by a relatively small group of desert-adapted pioneers. Y chromosome studies have revealed 4 specific genetic lineages that appear to be directly associated with ancient Saharan populations. These lineages, designated as a 3M13, EM2, EM78, and RV88, are found today in populations both north and south of the Sahara, a pattern that could only have developed when the desert was green and habitable. The dating of these genetic markers corresponds precisely with the last Green Sahara period, providing powerful evidence for the role of climate change in facilitating human migrations. The genetic analysis also reveals the dramatic impact of the Sahara's transformation into a desert. When the Green Sahara dried up around 5,500 years ago, populations were suddenly isolated on opposite sides of an expanding barrier. This isolation is clearly visible in the genetic record as a sharp reduction in gene flow between North and Sub-Saharan African populations. The timing of this genetic isolation matches perfectly with climate data, showing the final desiccation of the Sahara. But the genetic story isn't just about major migrations. It also reveals the remarkable persistence of some desert populations. Studies of the Tuareg people, who have lived in the Sahara for thousands of years, show genetic lineages that appear to trace back to the original Green Sahara populations. These genetic signatures suggest that some groups managed to adapt to the increasingly arid conditions and remained in the desert, even as it became one of the most hostile environments on Earth. The genetic evidence also illuminates the role of desert oases as refugia during harsh climatic periods. Populations in major oasis settlements show genetic signatures indicating that they served as places where desert travelers could rest, resupply, and intermarry with local populations. These oases weren't just way stations for travelers. They were melting pots where genetic lineages from across vast desert regions came together and mixed. Ancient DNA recovered from archaeological sites has provided even more direct evidence of desert migrations. Genetic material extracted from human remains in the Sahara, dating to the Green Sahara period, shows clear connections to both North African and Sub-Saharan populations, confirming that the region served as a zone of genetic mixing and cultural exchange. When these populations were forced to disperse as the climate dried, they carried this mixed genetic heritage to their new homes across the continent. The genetic record also reveals the sophisticated population strategies that ancient desert peoples used to maintain viable communities in harsh environments. Analysis of ancient DNA shows evidence of systematic intermarriage between groups from widely separated regions, suggesting that desert populations maintained extensive social networks that prevented the genetic isolation that could lead to population collapse in marginal environments. Modern genetic studies of traditional desert peoples have revealed adaptations that may date back thousands of years. Populations with long histories of desert residence show genetic variations that affect kidney function, allowing more efficient water conservation. Others show variations in genes affecting heat tolerance and sun sensitivity. These adaptations represent evolutionary responses to desert environments that occurred over timescales of hundreds of generations. The timing and pattern of these genetic adaptations provide insights into the challenges faced by ancient desert populations. Genes affecting water conservation show evidence of strong natural selection, indicating that populations face severe dehydration stress over extended periods. Adaptations for heat tolerance show geographic patterns that correspond to the harshest desert regions, suggesting that the most extreme environments drove the most dramatic evolutionary responses. Genetic analysis has also revealed the extensive networks of cultural and biological exchange that connected ancient desert populations across vast distances. Stone tool traditions, artistic styles, and even specific genetic markers moved across thousands of miles of desert, indicating that successful desert adaptation involved not just local survival skills, but participation in continent-wide networks of knowledge and resource sharing. The genetic legacy of ancient desert crossings extends far beyond the populations that remained in arid regions. Many of the genetic lineages that can be traced to desert-adapted populations eventually spread to every continent, carrying with them genetic variations that may have contributed to human success in diverse environments worldwide. The genetic heritage of desert survival became part of the global human gene pool. Perhaps most remarkably, genetic studies suggest that desert crossing abilities may have been inherited traits, that were specifically selected for during human evolution. Populations with genetic markers associated with successful desert adaptation show higher frequencies of genes affecting spatial reasoning, long-term memory, and stress tolerance, cognitive abilities that would have been crucial for surviving. Long-distance journeys through hostile environments. The study of ancient DNA has also revealed that desert crossing wasn't a one-time event, but a recurring theme in human prehistory. Genetic evidence shows multiple waves of population movement between Africa and Asia, corresponding to different periods when climate conditions made desert crossing possible. Each wave left its own genetic signature, creating the complex patterns of human genetic diversity we see today. Modern populations in desert regions continue to show genetic evidence of their ancestors' remarkable adaptability. Studies of Bedouin populations in Arabia, Tuareg communities in the Sahara, and Aboriginal groups in Australia all reveal genetic adaptations that reflect thousands of years of desert survival. These populations represent living libraries of genetic information about human adaptation to extreme environments. The genetic record also provides sobering reminders of the costs of desert survival. Populations that attempted to cross deserts during unfavorable climate periods often left no genetic trace in modern populations, suggesting that failed migrations resulted in complete population extinction. The genetic signatures we can detect today represent the successful minority whose descendants survived to pass on their genes. Looking forward, the genetic lessons of ancient desert crossings may become increasingly relevant as climate change creates new challenges for human survival. The genetic variations that enabled our ancestors to survive in extreme environments may provide clues for understanding human adaptability in a changing world. The molecular memory preserved in our DNA may be one of our most valuable resources for facing an uncertain future. Chapter 10. Desert Wisdom: The Survival Strategies that Enabled Our Ancestors to Cross. Endless deserts weren't lost when the modern world developed technologies that seemed to make such skills obsolete. Hidden within the traditions of contemporary desert peoples, embedded in the genetic adaptations of populations with ancient desert heritage, and preserved in archaeological sites across the world's arid regions, lies a treasure trove of knowledge that may be more relevant today than ever before. Climate change is transforming our planet in ways that echo the challenges our ancestors faced as the Green Sahara dried up and disappeared. Desertification is expanding across multiple continents. Traditional water sources are becoming unreliable, and extreme weather events are forcing populations to adapt or migrate. The skills that allowed early humans to thrive in hostile environments may provide crucial insights for navigating the environmental challenges of the 21st century. Modern research with traditional desert peoples has revealed the extraordinary sophistication of ancient survival knowledge. Tuareg navigators in the Sahara can determine their precise location using a combination of star positions, wind patterns, sand dune shapes, and subtle variations in the color and texture of the desert surface. These skills, passed down through hundreds of generations, represent perhaps the most sophisticated navigation system ever developed for use without instruments. Australian Aboriginal communities maintain song lines, traditional songs that encode detailed geographical information in mythological narratives. These oral maps contain information about water sources, seasonal food availability, and safe travel routes across thousands of square miles of desert terrain. Some of these songs preserve environmental knowledge that is over 40,000 years old, making them among the oldest continuous information preservation systems in human culture. The water management techniques developed by ancient desert peoples are attracting renewed attention from modern engineers and hydrologists. Traditional qanat systems, used for thousands of years in the Middle East, can transport water across dozens of miles of desert through underground channels that minimize evaporation. These systems are still functional today and are being studied as models for sustainable water management in arid regions facing increasing demand and decreasing supply. Modern attempts to replicate ancient desert survival techniques have revealed their extraordinary effectiveness. Experimental archaeologists using only traditional materials and methods have successfully extracted water from plants, navigated across trackless terrain, and survived for extended periods in some of the world's harshest environments. These experiments demonstrate that ancient survival knowledge wasn't primitive, it was highly sophisticated and remarkably efficient. The psychological strategies developed by ancient desert peoples are finding applications in modern survival training and stress management. Military survival schools now incorporate techniques based on traditional desert navigation and mental conditioning. The ability to maintain cognitive function under extreme stress, to make complex decisions with incomplete information, and to maintain group cohesion during extended hardships are skills that remain valuable in many modern contexts. Traditional ecological knowledge, preserved by desert communities, contains crucial information about climate variability and environmental change. Oral histories maintained by Saharan populations contain records of rainfall patterns, vegetation changes, and animal behavior that extend back hundreds of years. This information provides baseline data for understanding current environmental changes and predicting future trends in ways that complement modern scientific monitoring. The genetic adaptations that enabled ancient desert survival continue to influence human health and performance in modern populations. Medical research has identified genetic variations common in populations with long desert heritage that affect kidney function, heat tolerance, and water conservation. Understanding these adaptations is providing insights into treating kidney disease, developing better hydration strategies for athletes and workers in hot climates, and even designing life support systems for space exploration. Modern urban planning is beginning to incorporate lessons learned from ancient desert settlements. Traditional desert architecture, which evolved over millennia to provide cooling without energy input, is inspiring new approaches to sustainable building design. The use of thermal mass, natural ventilation, and reflective surfaces pioneered by ancient desert builders is being rediscovered by architects seeking to reduce energy consumption in hot climates. The social innovations developed by desert peoples for managing scarce resources are providing models for modern resource management. Traditional systems for sharing water, coordinating migrations, and resolving conflicts over limited resources offer insights for managing scarcity in modern contexts. These systems, tested over thousands of years in some of the world's most challenging environments, demonstrate principles that could be applied to managing everything from urban water supplies to global climate change mitigation. Ancient desert crossing techniques are being studied by space agencies as they plan for human missions to Mars and other planets. The challenges of surviving in extreme environments with limited resources, navigating across featureless terrain, and maintaining psychological health during extended isolation closely parallel the challenges faced by ancient desert travelers. The survival strategies that enabled humans to cross the Sahara may help us cross the space between worlds. The preservation and transmission of complex knowledge without writing systems, mastered by ancient desert peoples, is attracting attention from modern information scientists. The techniques used to encode crucial survival information in memorable forms through songs, stories, and rituals offer insights for preserving important knowledge in modern contexts where written records might be lost or become inaccessible. Modern research is also revealing the continuing importance of the cognitive skills developed through traditional desert survival training. Studies have shown that people trained in traditional navigation techniques develop enhanced spatial reasoning abilities, improved long-term memory, and better skills at pattern recognition. These cognitive enhancements persist long after the initial training, suggesting that traditional survival skills provide benefits that extend far beyond their immediate applications. The community cooperation strategies developed by desert peoples are being studied as models for building resilience in modern communities facing environmental challenges. The social institutions that enable groups to coordinate resource use, share critical knowledge, and maintain social cohesion during extended hardships provide blueprints for community adaptation to climate change and other long-term challenges. Traditional desert medicine, based on thousands of years of experience with plants and treatments effective in arid environments, is contributing to modern pharmaceutical research. Desert plants that were used by ancient peoples for treating dehydration, heat stress, and other environment-related health problems are being studied for the development of new medications and treatments. The sustainable resource use practices developed by ancient desert peoples offer models for modern environmental management. Traditional systems that could support human populations in marginal environments for thousands of years without causing environmental degradation demonstrate principles of sustainability that could be applied to modern resource use challenges. Perhaps most importantly, the study of ancient desert survival reveals the extraordinary adaptability and resilience of human beings when faced with extreme environmental challenges. Our ancestors' success in not just surviving but thriving in some of the world's most hostile environments demonstrates that humans possess remarkable capacities for adaptation that may be crucial for facing the environmental challenges of the future. The integration of traditional knowledge with modern technology is creating new possibilities for desert survival and environment management. GPS systems that incorporate traditional navigation knowledge, water purification technologies based on ancient methods, and sustainable building techniques that combine traditional and modern approaches are examples of how ancient wisdom can enhance modern capabilities. As we face an uncertain environmental future, the knowledge preserved in the traditions of desert peoples and written in the archaeological record of ancient desert crossings represents an invaluable resource. These time-tested survival strategies, refined over thousands of years of human experience in extreme environments, may provide the key to maintaining human civilization in a changing world. The story of how early humans crossed endless deserts is ultimately a story about human ingenuity, adaptability, and resilience. It reminds us that our species has faced and overcome environmental challenges before, and that the skills and knowledge needed for survival in extreme conditions are part of our heritage as human beings. Chapter 11. The Legacy of the Crossing. The footprints of early humans crossing ancient deserts have long since been erased by millennia of wind and sand, but their legacy lives on in ways that continue to shape our species and our world. Every time a modern human demonstrates remarkable endurance, navigates by the stars, finds water in an unlikely place, or maintains hope in the face of impossible odds, they echo the achievements of ancestors who turned the world's most hostile environments into highways for human expansion. The cognitive revolution that enabled humans to dominate Earth may have its roots in the mental challenges of desert survival. The complex spatial reasoning required to navigate across trackless wastes, the memory skills needed to retain crucial survival information, and the abstract thinking necessary to plan for unpredictable environmental changes all contributed to the development of the advanced mental capabilities that distinguish our species from all others. Archaeological evidence suggests that many of the fundamental technologies that define human civilization first appeared in desert environments or among populations with desert heritage. Fire control, advanced tool making, food preservation, water storage, and even early forms of writing and record-keeping show their earliest development in arid regions where such innovations meant the difference between life and death. The social innovations required for successful desert crossing laid the groundwork for complex human societies. The cooperation, planning, and resource management skills that enabled small groups to survive in hostile environments became the foundation for the social organizations that would eventually build cities, nations, and global civilizations. The trust networks that allowed desert travelers to share crucial survival information evolved into the communication and exchange systems that underlie modern economic and political institutions. Modern genetic research reveals that virtually every human population outside of Africa carries DNA from ancestors who successfully crossed deserts during the great migrations of prehistory. The genetic variations that enabled desert survival, enhanced spatial cognition, improved stress tolerance, efficient metabolism, became part of the human gene pool and continue to influence human capabilities today. We are all, in a very real sense, the children of desert crossers. The cultural impact of ancient desert crossings extends far beyond survival techniques. Many of the world's major religions and philosophical traditions originated in desert environments or among peoples with desert heritage. The contemplative traditions that emerged from the solitude and challenge of desert life, the ethical systems developed to manage scarce resources fairly, and the spiritual insights born from confronting the vastness and power of nature all trace their origins to humanity's ancient relationship with arid landscapes. Language itself may bear the imprint of desert crossing. Linguistic analysis suggests that many fundamental concepts in human languages, words for navigation, time, distance, and resource management, show patterns consistent with origins in environments where such concepts were crucial for survival. The metaphors and imagery that persist in human language and literature often reflect the experiences of ancestors who knew intimately the challenges of finding water, reading the stars, and enduring in hostile landscapes. The artistic traditions that emerged from desert environments continue to influence human creativity today. The geometric patterns found in Islamic art, the astronomical imagery in Aboriginal rock paintings, and the landscape symbolism in many African traditions all reflect aesthetic sensibilities shaped by desert environments. These artistic traditions preserve and transmit environmental knowledge while creating beauty that speaks to fundamental human experiences of challenge, survival, and transcendence. Modern exploration and adventure continue to be motivated by the same drives that sent ancient humans into unknown deserts. The psychological rewards of successfully navigating challenging environments, of testing human capabilities against natural obstacles, and of discovering new territories reflect deeply rooted human motivations that were shaped by millions of years of exploration and migration. Space exploration, polar expeditions, and extreme sports all echo the ancient human drive to cross impossible barriers. The technological innovations that are shaping the modern world increasingly reflect principles first discovered by desert peoples. Satellite navigation systems that use celestial references, solar power technologies that harness desert sunshine, and water conservation methods that maximize efficiency in arid environments all build on foundations laid by ancient desert survivors. As we face environmental challenges that require sustainable technologies, the innovations of our desert-adapted ancestors are providing blueprints for solutions. Climate change is making the lessons of ancient desert crossing more relevant than ever. As traditional agricultural regions become more arid, as water resources become scarcer, and as extreme weather events become more common, the survival strategies developed by our ancestors are being rediscovered and adapted for modern use. Traditional knowledge about finding water, managing resources during scarcity, and maintaining social cohesion during environmental stress is being incorporated into modern adaptation strategies. The educational implications of understanding ancient desert crossing are profound. The story of how early humans mastered seemingly impossible environmental challenges provides powerful lessons about human capability, resilience, and adaptability. In an age when young people often feel overwhelmed by environmental and social challenges, the example of ancestors who successfully navigated far greater obstacles provides inspiration and practical guidance. Research into ancient desert survival is also contributing to our understanding of human psychology and cognitive development. The mental disciplines required for desert survival, sustained attention, complex problem-solving under stress, long-term planning in uncertain conditions, are precisely the cognitive skills that modern research identifies as crucial for success in complex, rapidly changing environments. The training methods used by traditional desert peoples to develop these skills are being studied and adapted for modern educational and professional development programs. The conservation implications of ancient desert knowledge are equally important. Traditional ecological knowledge preserved by desert peoples contains detailed information about sustainable resource use, environmental monitoring, and ecosystem management that complements and often exceeds modern scientific understanding. This knowledge is proving crucial for developing effective conservation strategies in arid regions that are under increasing pressure from development and climate change. The medical implications of desert adaptation research continue to unfold. As well, understanding how human populations adapted to extreme environmental conditions is providing insights into treating modern health problems. Research into the genetic adaptations that enable desert survival is contributing to treatments for kidney disease, heat-related illnesses, and even some forms of mental illness that may be related to stress response systems that evolved for survival in harsh environments. The story of how early humans crossed endless deserts is ultimately a story about the triumph of intelligence, cooperation, and determination over seemingly impossible obstacles. It reminds us that the same species that learned to find water in the world's driest places, to navigate across trackless wastes using only the stars, and to maintain hope and social cohesion during months of hardship, also went on to build civilizations, explore space, and develop technologies that can monitor and protect our entire planet. As we face an uncertain future filled with environmental challenges, resource constraints, and social pressures that sometimes seem overwhelming, we can draw strength and inspiration from the knowledge that we are the descendants of the ultimate survivors. The genetic, cultural, and technological legacy of those ancient desert crossers lives on in every human being, providing us with capabilities and knowledge that our ancestors paid for with their lives, but gifted to us for free. The endless deserts that once seemed like barriers to human expansion ultimately became highways that carried our species to every corner of the earth. The survival skills, cognitive abilities, and social innovations developed during those ancient crossings became the foundation for everything that makes us uniquely human. We are all, in the deepest sense, children of the desert crossing, inheritors of the greatest survival story ever told. As we reach the end of our journey through time, standing once again at the edge of that ancient desert where our story began, we can finally appreciate the true magnitude of what our ancestors accomplished. They didn't just cross empty wastelands, they transformed humanity itself in the process. The early humans who ventured into those endless seas of sand carried with them nothing but stone tools, intimate knowledge of their environment, and an unshakable determination to survive. What they discovered in those harsh landscapes wasn't just new territories, but new possibilities for what it meant to be human. The cognitive challenges of navigation, the social innovations required for cooperation under stress, and the technological Advances needed for survival in extreme conditions all contributed to the evolutionary leap that made modern human civilization possible. Today, as we face our own environmental challenges and uncertain future, the story of ancient desert crossing offers both inspiration and practical guidance. Our ancestors proved that humans possess remarkable capacities for adaptation when faced with seemingly impossible obstacles. They demonstrated that cooperation, ingenuity, and perseverance can overcome barriers that appear insurmountable. Most importantly, they showed that environmental challenges, rather than destroying human potential, can actually unlock capabilities that we never knew we possessed. The footprints of those ancient travelers have long since been erased by wind and time, but their legacy lives on in every human being alive today. We carry their genes, their cognitive abilities, and their indomitable spirit. The same species that learned to find water in the world's driest places and navigate by starlight across trackless wastes also went on to explore space, decode the human genome, and develop technologies that can monitor our entire planet. The deserts that once seemed like the ultimate barriers to human expansion ultimately became highways that carried our species to every corner of Earth. The survival skills and innovations developed during those ancient crossings became the foundation for everything that followed, from the first permanent settlements to the global civilization we know today. As we look toward the future, facing challenges that sometimes seem as daunting as the endless deserts our ancestors confronted, we can draw strength from their example. We are the inheritors of the ultimate survival story, the children of ancestors who proved that no obstacle is too great, no environment too hostile, and no journey too far for human determination and ingenuity. The greatest crossing isn't behind us. It's still happening as each new generation builds on the remarkable legacy of those first brave souls who dared to venture into the unknown and emerge to change the world forever.